19. The road was eerily quiet the entire afternoon and late into evening. To pass the time and fill the spooky silence, I shared the tale of how I'd met Roshan at the lake in the dark wood, then Priya underground. Dasini's rapt attention throughout the tale expressed her interest in the story, but I wondered how much it reflected how long she'd been without companionship. The Michonne estimated we were most likely to catch up to Roshan on the road between our next stop, Warrington, and the city to its northeast, Tralsby, if we maintained pace, piloted in shifts to keep an eye out for bandits, and rode around the clock. It depended on how long her captors stayed in Warrington. But she wasn't counting for the levels Priya and I would need to gain to play it safe. When I explained that we expected level 16 or better enemies surrounding our lost mage companion, the Michonne was receptive to any idea that involved swinging her sword. I relieved her of the reins at sundown when she'd cited fatigue and crawled into the cart to have a catnap.
Catnap was literally her word. I'd never take such liberties.
Priya leaned next to me on the cart after Dasini departed. We sat in companionable silence, and I noticed her hand rested on her belly. Had she done that before? She'd been pregnant for all of 2 days. Still, I sensed her calm acceptance of the turn of events. Though it helped me relax to know she was so comfortable, I still hadn't quite reached her level of chill about having a kid. I couldn't hide the associated emotions that came with the thoughts of fatherhood, but to her credit, she didn't bring them up. A few hours after the sun went down, when Dasini still hadn't returned, Priya had kissed my ear and ventured into the wagon. I perused my interface, but a while later I experienced an emotion I debated with technology in my Earth life. Loneliness. I didn't want to pull Pickney off the road to sleep and lose time, and Dasini and I sure wouldn't do any weapons training in the downpour, so I summoned Click. True to her usual grouchy disposition after a long absence, she'd stumbled back and forth on the bench before curling up and setting her chin on my leg. I smiled down and rubbed her smooth flesh hairs as I guided the horse with the other hand. Not that it needed guiding. After about an hour, Click perked up at a rustling sound and poked her head through the slit in the canvas.
"Click," I heard Priya call. "Come here, baby. Meet Dasini."
Click scurried through the split in the canvas, her pudgy belly getting caught on the lip and her hind legs pumping wildly in the air until her front ones pulled her through. Judging from the lack of commotion, I assumed that the introductions went well. Click didn't come back. Figures. Not that I blamed her. Sit out here with rain spatter or snuggle between 2 warm women. No-brainer. In the middle of the night, when the yawn attacks became annoying, I scanned my map and analyzed the terrain surrounding us on either side of the road as the fog of war vanished. Unlike the time I'd spent in the dark wood, sections of the map revealed wider areas as they became visible and we progressed north. On foot in the dark wood, the map only revealed as far as my eyes could see. I spotted a crooked blue line at the edge of the fog of war on my map. That must be the river Dasini mentioned. At the realization that the water source was close, my legs twitched for movement. I eased Pickney and the wagon to the side of the road and reached into the back for the skins situated just inside. They bounced on my chest and back as I made for the river. I shouldered my bow on the opposite side and cast inner illumination to make locating a break in the rocks easier. As I marched into the woods, rustles in the undergrowth prompted me to rip my bow off my shoulder. I had an arrow knocked so fast I impressed myself. Then a little black head popped up nearby, and I spied unmistakable fleshy hairs vibrating in the rain. I thought you were keeping the ladies warm. My pet bared her teeth and uttered the rapid-fire noise for which she was named. Yeah, okay, at least you prefer my company when it means exploring. I clicked my tongue at her. Let's go. I checked a prompt as we set off together. You have reached rank 3 in light magic. The cast of inner illumination had gained me another skill point. I let Click locate and lead me down the best path to the river. The static sound of the water lapping against the banks was subtle and relaxing, despite the heavy rain. Thick brush swished against my chest piece as I slipped sideways around dense foliage and pushed along. Click had an easier time because of her low-to-the-ground profile. We arrived at the river in 10 minutes, though it seemed closer on the map. I'd have to start using a consistent zoom level on the tool to predict distances. Maybe there was some way to show a legend and ruler. I'd check later. I slipped out of my clothes and dipped half a foot. Though the air had been warm most days I'd spent in Enora, the rain had left the river icy. It would be bathwater only in function, not in sensation. The best way to acclimate was to get it over with, so I jumped. Blah! Cripes! My body adjusted quickly enough, but the initial immersion sucked.
I scrubbed myself as best I could without soap, then stepped out, refreshed.
The rain prickled at my skin, but was warmer than the river. I just slid my legs into my pants when rattling from my pet reached my ears, and those clicks I heard. Danger! As if she'd spoken English. Still bare-chested, I threw on my quiver and grabbed my bow. What is it? Click crouched about 30 yards ahead of me, her flesh hairs standing on end. I tiptoed through the soaking grass lining either side of the riverbank and perked up my ears to listen for activity, but the rain proved too loud to distinguish sounds. As I bent and drew closer to my pet, I clicked my tongue. What is it? I repeated. I followed her sightline through the shrubbery to a curve in the river that drew its flow back to the southeast. Motion caught my eye, and I eased forward another step to peek past the branches blocking my view. A figure hunched down by the river. Its wet coat was thick, with long hairs of black and gray, much like Click's coloring. Its head raised up from the water and a long snout pointed in our direction. I ran a check. Plains wolf. Level 12 beast. What do you think, bud? Can you stand for a little XP? Want to stretch your claws? My pet's head rose, and she grinned as quiet clicking emanated from her throat. You're so violent-natured. I like that about you. A little solo grinding wouldn't hurt. Destiny was the highest level of us all at 17. If I battled with her and Priya in a group, I assumed there'd be a combat XP penalty applied. Click didn't cause a penalty, so why not? Still acclimating to my new world, I took a quick peek at my ranged abilities to prepare for a fight. Ranged combat skills. Perforating arrow. Ranged attack. Adds 3 to 5 damage to ranged attacks. Cost 35 mana. Cast time. Instant. Longer draws use more mana but cause more damage. Cooldown. 15 seconds. Vine entrapment. Spell. Level 9. Call forth vines from the ground to bind your enemies. Cost. 25 mana. Cast time. 3 seconds. Cooldown. NA. Can be cast by any class with affinity. Nature spells. This spell has diminished returns when casting on the same being. While I was tooling, I turned on a combat logging option I'd avoided during the dark levels, lest it distract me and I end up dead. Now that I survived, I wanted to capture the more in-depth math for later analysis.
I donned my chest piece and made sure it was fastened all the way around the sides.
Then I ticked my head toward the wolf. Get to it, then. Click launched out of the shrubs. Standing, I found myself astonished at the speed she carried her portly body across the distance. I stretched out my hand and cast the new spell Jara had gifted me 2 days before. A green glow bloomed around my fingers. The wolf's head jerked up from the water again, but this time it charged toward my porcupunk pet. Some vague notion picked at my brain as I watched my pet's oversized hedgehog-like body close the distance. The wolf screeched to a halt as thick roots erupted from the muddy soil and surrounded its legs. Its shoulders flexed as it struggled against the vines, pinning it to the ground. I pumped my fist in victory, but only once. Whipping an arrow from the quiver tied to my hip, I fired at the wolf just as Click arrived and lunged for its throat. I missed, but a message in my interface surprised me. +1 bow skill. Your bow skill is now rank 16. You have learned the skill, Drilling Arrow. Skill cost, 25 mana. Cast time, 3 seconds. Damage, 200% weapon damage. +1 ranged attack. Your ranged attack is now rank 25. I don't have to impact my target to gain skill points. That was a first. And it actually made sense, because even when I missed, I was practicing my form and improving it. I shoved the thought away. The wolf lowered its head and rammed my pet as the porcupunk launched into the air. Their foreheads collided, and though she'd been the one in motion, Click took the worst of the effect as she'd weighed half as much. Click, -21 HP. I had to admit, it was a nice move. The vine snapped and retreated into the ground as Click rolled off to one side. My porcupunk recovered as the wolf turned in my direction and sniffed the air. I thought to check Click's stats, but before I opened my interface, they appeared on their own. Click, porcupunk, level 10 pet, attributes, strength, 10, dexterity, 7, Intelligence, 3. Wisdom, 2. Constitution, 11. HP, 99. Mana, 120. Stamina, 120. Skills, Spike, Level 2. Your porcupunk flips onto its back and slips spikes from beneath its flesh hairs to puncture enemies. Bite, Auto, Level 3. Your pet bites the underside of your enemy, attracting its aggression. Hobble, Level 10. Your pet tears at your enemy's leg or underside, slowing its movement speed. Whoa, I can just think about the stats and they appear? What did I do? I willed the text away and brought it up again, excited by the streamlined mechanic. With the mental note made that I would further investigate, RTFM, I returned my attention to the reason I'd pulled up Click's stats. Her hit points showed 99. They re-engaged. Clicks rattled, and growls filled the air above the rain's persistent patters. I brought up another arrow. Click, -9 HP. Plains Wolf, -11 HP. Click had lopped off about 10% of the wolf's health. The two animals circled each other, showing the full breadths of their dangerous teeth. I drew back my bowstring but held fast to allow my energy to surge through my fingers and into the arrow. It would burn more mana, but the extended draw of my ranged ability would inflict more damage, and allowed Click to piss the wolf off further so I wouldn't gain aggro and bring it charging at me when the projectile landed. Perforating Arrow, an armor-piercing ability with an effective range of 50 yards. Loses damage with distance traveled. Adds 3 to 5 damage to ranged attacks. Cost, 35 mana. Cast time, instant. Longer draws channel more mana but cause more damage. Cooldown, 15 seconds. When Click landed a bite, blood spurted from the wolf's neck. Plains Wolf, -15 HP. Click, +25 aggression. I loosed the arrow. A yelp filled the air as my projectile pierced the wolf's thick hide on its front haunch, in the center of the meaty muscle, causing it to flop onto its face. A purple explosion of light gleamed on impact and glowed for a moment. Critical hit. Base damage, 17 × 2 for 34 damage. Damage modifier. Dexterity, 16 × 0.5 equals +8 damage. Plains Wolf, -42 HP. +1 ranged attack. Your ranged attack skill has increased to 26. Okay, math was cool and all, but I would never be that much of a dweeb. I ticked the extended combat log option down one notch. The beast recovered but found itself unable to put weight on the leg, though its health bar showed it still maintained about 40% of its reserves. Click quickly seized the advantage, leaping onto the animal's back and tearing viciously at the thick mane where its neck met its back. Plains Wolf, -11. Plains Wolf, -11. Bleed. Plains Wolf, -2 HP. I readied another arrow, focusing on my other ranged skill. Drilling Arrow, 200% ranged weapon damage. Cost, 25 mana. Cast time, 3 seconds. Cooldown, 30 seconds. This would drain my mana pool down to about 20%, and I need to let it recover before I could entrap the wolf or fire another of my arrow skills, but I didn't plan on its survival. As I readied the arrow, expecting a forward notch in my yellow XP bar after release, the wolf surprised me when it craned its neck back, reared its snout into the air, and howled. That little pricking of nerves in my brain from moments ago rang like an old-school telephone. Wolves are pack animals. Just up the rise from where Click tore at the wolf, a blur of white motion charged downhill through the trees at blinding speed. I focused on my pet and redirected her to the oncoming threat. Bite! Bite! Click launched off the unfinished target and acquired the second as I released my third arrow. Our first target died in a flash of yellow. The second wolf lowered its head as it charged, but this time my pet was ready. She rolled into a ball and slid under the beast, ripping at its belly with silvery teeth as its momentum carried it right over her. Bite. Plains Wolf, -17 HP. Click spun around, sliding in the wet grass of the hillside, then leapt toward the wolf. She bit its hind leg before it could turn. Hobble. Additional effect. Plains Wolf movement speed slowed by 15%. Additional effect. Bleed. -5 HP. -5 HP. Blood flowed to the ground beneath its belly as I withdrew another arrow. We'd whipped around to handle the new threat like an Indy car on fresh tires. Then my breath caught as I spotted 2 more streams of motion raging down the hill. They split off, one charged toward Click and the other toward me. I knew Click would have her hands full with one healthy wolf plus the one she'd sliced under the belly. I'd have to handle the one charging at me solo. Focusing on the width of the canine's shoulders, I disabled all combat messages. At the very least, I needed to slow the beast. A well-placed arrow might do the trick if it pierced the wolf's face, but if my shot wasn't perfect, I'd be in real trouble. I wasn't that good yet. An image of me dying and resurrecting alone at Breeder's place with my companions a day's journey away informed me what a stupid decision this had been. I'd just picked a fight without my party in the most perilous world outside of hell. I hadn't even thought to bring my bag, just those stupid water skins. So I didn't have a health potion. There would be no second chances. I have got to do better. Would've, could've, should've. My hand quivered under the strain of the nocked and drawn arrow. The rain fell in sheets, and I blinked furiously to keep water out of my eyes as my target's massive haunches pumped hard in my direction. The wolf's long claws threw wet clumps in the air behind as it bore down. The tendons in my draw fingers crackled in my ears with their itch to release, but I had no intention of firing until I saw the animal's irises. Yellow energy flowed through my fingers and into the arrow as I readied drilling arrow. Even with my slow mana recovery, I'd gotten back about 25%. That would have to be enough. Wouldn't it? My interface broke my focus as Click's health bar drained to about half. If I rushed, maybe. I released as the wolf closed the final steps between us. The arrow sailed wide of my intended mark, but still pierced its left shoulder and filled it with exploding yellow light. The wolf stumbled and slid as it tried to find purchase on wet, high grass. In a display of deft agility, it kept its feet and plowed forward. At the last moment, I dropped to the ground and rolled under its front paws, stealing a tactic out of my pet's playbook. The wolf tumbled over me as I rolled beneath it and back to my feet.
I slipped and slid on the wet surface, but stabilized by throwing my arms out.
My bow rattled to the wet earth. Then I reached for my daggers. You have changed your class to assassin. Without so much as a glance backward, I tore off toward Click's battle against the other 2 wolves. A class switch meant I'd have to deal with a universal ability cooldown before my assassin skills became available, so every second would count. Though I'd learned stealth before becoming an assassin, Enora had seen fit to include the ability in my global cooldowns, so I was stuck until they abated. Again, Enora was a bitch sometimes. I glared at the timer and pumped my legs until the muscles ached, knowing the wolf I'd tripped up would soon recover and zoom up on my 6. I eyed my abilities bar to watch as the horizontal line graying them out slowly revealed their color as it climbed each ability's square from bottom to top. Global cooldown, 12 seconds. I huffed and puffed, trying to force deeper gulps of air into my lungs as I heard, or maybe imagined, the wolf bearing down from behind. Luckily, the points I'd put into Constitution and my +1 stamina buff, along with the fact I'd been standing in place while firing arrows, meant I ran with more than 50% of my stamina available. But there was no balancing my stamina meter by slowing my pace, because the wolf would surely catch me. A swift end to this confrontation was my only hope. If I lived long enough to use my assassin skills, they'd burn what stamina I had left. Stamina, 175. To buy myself an extra second, I turned hard in front of the trunk of a wide tree. I almost lost my footing in the wet grass, but flinging my arms out to the side and flailing a couple times helped steady me. Global cooldown, 9 seconds. Time crept. My legs kicked in slow motion. My quads burned and my feet threatened to slide in the muck with every stride. I sensed death as it closed from behind. Recalling a tactic I'd used when I evaded a dinosaur in the dark wood days earlier, I sheathed one dagger, grabbed a sapling, then planted my heels as I slid across soaked pine straw in a semicircle. I launched in a new direction, and face-planted. Come on. A glance ventured over my shoulder revealed that the injured wolf faltered when it tried to run and scurry around the tree trunk from the side where I'd appeared so it could cut me off. But the sudden turn shifted its weight onto its bum shoulder, and I bent backward as it slid right by. Its yip rose above the rain as it recovered its footing and turned to pursue. I scurried to my feet and sped away. About 30 yards ahead, Click fought for her life against the two wolves, one on either side of her, nipping at her from both directions as she clicked furiously and kept them at a distance with short lunges. I blinked at the wolf on Click's right. Plains wolf, level 10 beast. Level 10. Perfect. That's my bitch right there. Stamina, 125. Global cooldown, 6 seconds. If my stamina ran out, I'd slide to the ground huffing and puffing as the wolf behind made me its dinner. That yellow bar ticked down quickly now as my exertion level caught up with me and the diminishing returns kicked in. Ignoring it, I glared ahead. Click would only last so long. Pet health, 19%. I ran hard down the incline, ignoring the wet surface, risking an out-of-control slide into the fray. Stamina, 110. A meter blinked red. Pet health, 10%. Global cooldown, 4 seconds. Now! I focused on Click and sent a mental command. Disengage! Click lunged away from the wolves as one bore down on her backside, narrowly evading the bite that would have finished her. Turning toward me, her body warbled as she sprinted as fast as her legs would carry her. The two wolves tore off in her direction, toward me. The wolf behind me growled furiously, and I risked a glance over my shoulder just as it lunged into the air. Click was 10 feet away, the other two wolves ready to pounce as we all came together. Cooldown, 1 second. Stamina, 93. Pet health, 9%. Dismiss! Click faded from existence as the global cooldown expired. I envisioned a cloud and stepped through it while focusing on the last wolf to have engaged Click. Shadow merge. I vanished. Two wolves careened into one another. An arrow lodged in one shoulder caused a heavy limp. The other bled from the wound Click left in its stomach as it tore downhill after her. I reappeared behind the healthy wolf I'd inspected a moment earlier, dagger in hand.
If I wanted to do this right, those other two wolves couldn't get to me as they realized they collided with each other and not my pet.
They were both a higher level than I. They might spot me or break my stealth by sniffing me out. So as much as I would have liked to wait for my stamina to tick back up as I prowled around, I'd be damned if I stood idle. I shoved my daggers into their sheaths and cocked my eye at the wet tufts of hair on the animal before me. I lunged. My stealth broke as I grabbed the back of the wolf's mane and threw my weight on top of it, holding on for my life as it twisted its head and bucked. I pushed energy through the hands gripping its mane, willing myself to hold on as the progress bar rolled across my screen. Stamina, 67%. Considering my low stamina, it was a good thing that Pacify Beast used mana. The other two wolves turned toward our struggle, but I didn't spare them any attention. This was my last chance to stay alive, and I had to focus on my skill cast if I didn't want to wake up a half-day's travel south of here in a town where people might want to ask me questions about a corpse I left in the street. Besides, having my flesh ripped away wasn't so attractive a prospect. Wet hairs slipped through my grip, and I tumbled to the earth. The other two wolves stopped and circled at a wide berth as I lay on my back, daggers now withdrawn and pointed in each direction. I huffed madly, the sky above me spinning as rain poured onto my face. You're not getting me without a load of pain, doggies. The level 10 wolf turned and paced toward me from the front as my daggers pointed out to each side. Its huge snout sniffed. 3 was too many. I was finished. I closed my eyes, waiting for the unfathomable pain of having my flesh ripped to pieces. But nothing happened. I blinked my eyes open and found the wolf still just standing there. Text appeared at the bottom center of my HUD. You have pacified Plains Wolf. Level 10 Plains Wolf is now your pet. I peered at an injured wolf, turned my gaze on my new companion, and sent a mental command. Kill that one. My rejuvenated, healthy new pet lunged at the wolf with the belly wound and growled furiously as it shook its mane between its teeth. The wolf who'd received an arrow in its shoulder backed away, confused, easing from the conflict, apparently unsure of what to do. So, I pushed myself onto one knee, grabbed the blade of one dagger, and threw it. The blade lodged itself into the wolf's eye. A sick pop signaled the end of the battle as my final adversary fell, and my new pet relaxed its jaw as its new enemy dropped to the ground with a gaping, bloody hole in its throat. Despite the odds, your thrown weapon skill has increased to rank 4. Lucky bastard. I scoffed, then I chuckled. Then, the laughter burst forth. I flopped into the mud, gulping air and raindrops down my throat, staring at the sky as the wolf's big head appeared over me. I spoke between huffs. "Hey, buddy. Thanks. I'm Gemini." The wolf licked my face. Since my stamina was slower than molasses in recovering when it got that low, I lay on my back, feeling the cool rain pelting my face. My back was covered in mud and grass that had slipped beneath my chest piece, so I dipped back into the river. The wolf wandered in a kind of loose patrol while I scrubbed for the second time. This time, the water cooled my flesh in the best way.